Maybe. Yeah, we'll do one up there. Good. Let's see. Yeah. Throw one of them. Yeah. Andrea, can you hear us? Back to your...
Yeah, Rex, there's a lot of feedback. Yeah.
Can you hear us now?
No, there's a lot of feedback.
You get feedback. So that's mute.
Yes, that's better.
This is better right now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, so we'll introduce ourselves first. I'm Michael Blahoff.
That's all you're gonna say?
I'm gonna go into it in a second.
Oh, okay. I'm Carrie McCabe.
And we both work in the Water Enforcement Energy Sector Compliance section. It's a mouthful, but what we focus on is mostly gonna be saltwater spills and SPCC related, and we do the enforcement and the inspections on almost both fronts. We'll dive into that more in detail as we go through the slides. But if there's anything water related and you have salt or crew going to it, then that's where we kind of come in.
You need me to scroll through?
Yeah, let's see if it clicks. There it goes.
Is your speaker still on?
I think so, yeah. Yeah.
But on your computer.
Shouldn't be, no. Is there still feedback? Let's see. Yeah, everything's turned off.
Is it turned off on that though?
On what?
Yeah, you're gonna have to go to settings.
You wanna?
If you can back out of it.
I don't know what I'm.
So you have to come, oh, you're on?
Yeah.
Right there. That's the microphone. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I had it turned off in Zoom.
It's shut off right there. Back to the screen.
Are we better online right now?
I think so.
Okay. raise your hand or something in the meeting so we can stop. So I think it's yours, Zoom, actually. Muted. Or is that phone up here? Or do you have a laptop?
It's pulling from right there.
Okay.
We're using this for the audio,
Okay,
so it's got a,
yeah, it has to come
all
up.
we're using is this one speaker right here.
Okay, perfect. Well, yeah, just stop us if it gets too much noise in that Zoom meeting. So what is SPCC? It's the Spill Prevention, Control, and Countermeasures. And it's regulated under Title 40 CFR Part 112. And when do you need an SPCC plan? There's going to be two reasons when. It's going to be if your facility it can reasonably be expected to discharge oil to navigable waters of the U.S. and its adjoining shoreline. So any water body that usually holds water year round, those are going to be the water bodies that you're going to need an SPCC plan for sure. And then the ones that are closer to water that's not year round, that's when you're going to have to reach out to the SPCC plan writer, or you can reach out to us as well on that. And then the other one for having an SPCC plan is going to be above ground storage that holds more than 1,320 gallons, or it's an underground storage that holds more than 42,000 gallons. And if y'all have any questions, just raise your hand and stop me while I'm talking. What? Yeah, there's some that you might have to click twice though. So the purpose of having an SPCC plan is going to be prevention, control, and countermeasure. So to prevent oil discharge from reaching the waterway, and then it's going to be to control, to ensure you have an effective response. So say you do have a large spill and an OSC from EPA comes out, they can pull up that plan and know where to respond to the spill and clean it up and have different locations to clean up. That will be cited in the SPCC plan on where your gathering points are going to be. And then the countermeasure part, it's going to ensure proactive measurement. So it's going to hopefully eliminate having that spill in the first place. So now I'm going to dive into some issues that we see with the plan. And so common issues that we see are going to be no plan on site at all. So we'll show up and they won't have a plan. And usually most SPCC inspections, it's going to be an announced inspection. So they'll usually give you a call around 2 weeks ahead of time. So that way you can get your plan set up, and usually they want it sent over to them to review the plan. They're in that 2 week time frame. But if you don't have it yet, you have those 2 weeks to get it at the facility by the time they're inspecting it. And then plan not certified by a PE. So later on in these slides, I'll have a template, a link to a template plan that you can fill out, but you'll still need to get it signed by a PE by the end of it, by the time we inspect it. And then no management approval for the plan, and that's just a signature you put on the plan. So as long as you go through it all, read all the steps, and get it signed everywhere you need to, that's a small little thing we see all the time on them. And then records. So you have to keep these records, and it states it in the plan for 3 years at a time. So the previous 3 years, you have to have records. So this one is going to be no inspection record. So that's just a walkthrough. And if you're out there every day, you can just choose random days to do an inspection on yourself and have that in your records. Just keep the previous 3 years of that. And then no training records. And the training records could be talking to whoever your hand is, just over coffee, and then just write it down that you had that talk and that was your training record. You have to hold that for 3 years as well. And then no amendments after updates. So that's going to be if you take a tank out or add a tank into that tank battery, then you're going to have to update that plan and show that it's been updated in that SPCC plan. And then this is the big one we see all the time is plan description. It's not site specific. So whenever you get your plan, either you make it or someone else makes it for you, you need to read through it and make sure it's site specific. So it'll be, trying to think of an example on this one, it would be, say you're draining water from containment, you want to say that you're there visually watching the water drain from containment. This small stuff like that, you're gonna have to go in and sometimes add to it. But you want to be as specific as you can be on the plan, so it doesn't give any reason to flag that one. Any questions on any of that?
How often are we supposed to do the notations on the walkthrough and all of that?
So I'd have to double check on that one. I want to say monthly on it. And then just keep the records for the 3 years on that monthly walkthrough.
And then draining like rainwater, that's every time.
Yes, every time on that. And then in the plan, it's important to say that you're there visually inspecting it while it's draining that.
To go from larger tank to a smaller tank, still have to have a new plan?
Still have to have this, you just have to amend the facility diagram on that.
Does PE have to sign off on?
Yes, he does. So that's another one, yeah.
What if you replace the vessel with the same size vessel?
Then you're good on that. Yep. Because that's gonna fall into the capacity of secondary containment. So as long as you aren't messing with that capacity and it's staying the same, then you're good. But if you start adding, say you take one big tank away and 2 small tanks equal that same volume, you're still gonna have to update that plan because you have 2 more in there.
I have a question though.
Yep.
Because I talked to Jerry about it. So what if you can't have a blanket plan with all your leases on it? They all have to be site specific?
Site specific, yes.
And
Yeah.
then it just has to be a professional engineer, not like a petroleum
Yeah,
engineer?
just a professional engineer. Yeah.
What type of engineer?
I'd have to dig into it. As long as they have their certificate.
Yeah, it's any kind of engineer. Pick
Yeah.
Industrial engineer, electrical engineer.
It's a PE.
Yeah.
I'm a chemical engineer by degree, but I'm registered. We have to take petroleum engineer. So, Louisiana state.
Yeah. Perfect. So now we'll go to some field issues that we find, and that's gonna be no or inadequate secondary containment. And a lot of the times, whenever they're coming to pick up oil, they'll walk over that berm and you'll get a low spot over time. So just keeping that low spot filled in too before you get an inspection, that's a big one. Or they'll completely back over your berm to pick up oil and will knock your secondary containment down over time. So that's 2 things right there. And then having this open drain valve here. So this is a big one. This is kind of why we're in the area is with these drain valves, you'll have that saltwater discharge come from it, or if something happens at the facility while you're not there, then you'll have oil come through that. So in the regulation, you have to have it capped and no drips or anything coming from it. And then usually you'll have a valve on it too. So as long as it's closed, that valve's closed and it's capped, then we're all good on the SPCC side.
So if you don't have one of those, you're just doing rainwater by using a pump.
Yeah.
That has to be written every time the rainwater.
Is pumped back into the system.
No, it's pumped out over the firewall.
Oh, over? Yes, I know it'd have to be documented.
I mean, it's just rainwater.
Yeah, yeah. And that would be something you would fit in the plan, how you get rid of water from secondary containment. So you would say you pump it out and you're visually inspecting that as you're pumping it out.
So every time my pumpers pump rainwater out of the firewall, I've got to write that in the plan.
Yes. Or just a document. You just have to document it. That doesn't have to be in the plan. Just separately document that this day, this time, pump water out, visually inspect it.
Could they have a notebook, let's say first lease is Brine, and the second sheet of paper is David,
and they had them a book, and they kept up with it in the book.
Yeah, that'd be perfect.
So that's
Instead of-
tomorrow.
Yep, keep it in
That's
a book.
sufficient.
Yep, keep
Okay.
it in a book, and then if it is, as long as it, if you dial it into like, will be a facility. So
Yeah.
like such and such tank battery.
Right.
Yeah.
You write
perfect.
down the specific lease, but the
Yeah.
bumper just keeps up his
Yeah.
bumper book.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a sheet of paper that says like the Langley #1 and the Reynolds #2
Yeah.
and Brine #3, and you just go to that page, write down when you do something, you got a master book.
Yep, that'd be perfect. And then just keep 3 years of those books, and then as it goes on, just keep storing that old one, and just keep 3 years on hand.
Do you put in the book gravity drain or just when you pump it out?
All of it, yeah. So,
Does there need to be a way of describing how you're doing it too? Like, let's say that, you know, with people saying pump or buy a pipe, do you need to add that too, of how it was?
yeah, I would.
Would it be okay to have it in a notebook, then type it into a sheet and then keep that as a way of doing?
Yeah,
Okay.
because, and you'll have that warning too of that usually 2 weeks or so before they come, so then you can pull that sheet,
Pull all that
Yeah.
out, yeah.
and then you'll be all set.
Because the notebook seems like that'd be easier than just taking it from the notebook and putting it on paper.
Yeah,
Would be easier, okay.
Or you need like a time, drain opened at 10:42, closed at 10:50, a capacity of what all you're needing in this.
time, and then,
Day.
the date,
Of
yeah,
course, the
And then-
location, the what, that like inches, like, do we have to keep up with rainfall?
no, not on that, but with, the visual inspection, you're gonna know if there's a sheen or no sheen.
Okay, I
So,
got you.
Yeah, so you'll wanna make sure it's date, time, no sheen, and
I got you.
either the valve or the pump.
Do y'all remember that old AEQ permit, the 000 WG, the saltwater, general saltwater stuff? Well, they had a list in there that is, if you have a copy of that old permit, there's some really good stuff in there about how to document that stuff. So they'll tell you like, does it have a sheen on it? It gives you all the steps to filling out an inspection for draining your tank battery.
And then if you, going off of this one as well, if you do, say, have a release inside containment and it's salt water, and then you clean that up, you get a bunch of rainwater, and you go to release that, that still can have large amounts of, salt in it as well. So at that point, I would test the water more than just a visual inspection before you release it. Because what we're looking for is high, total dissolved solids in the water bodies nearby facilities. And we'll see if they had a spill inside secondary containment months before we were even out there. Then they release just the rainwater that's in the containment. It'll still be high going all the way to the water body. So just ensuring that you don't have any salt in there is gonna be the best idea.
The regulation read is that you can discharge uncontaminated stormwater without a permit. Once it gets contaminated, it's no longer just stormwater at that point. And so to get around that not having a permit, it can't be contaminated. So if you open up a point source, it's got salt water in it, or it's got crude oil in it, it's not stormwater anymore. So this is the distinction that we're trying to make here. It is absolutely no permit required, straight up stormwater, but how do you know that it doesn't have a sheen on it? And then they make these little dipstick looking meters that test for conductivity or TDS. I'm talking about probably less than $30, and you stick it in there and it cranks you out a number. And
What
if
is
it's
that called, man?
What is,
It'll just, if you look up a
like a
TDS reader,
hawk,
A
yeah.
TDS?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
TDS or a conductivity meter. yeah.
pH.
Yeah.
They can do some multimeter type stuff, but I think,
and the best way to pull that too is gonna be if you just pull it straight from this
Yeah.
pipe right here. Because if you skim the top, so that has a tendency to sink. So you wanna get the lowest point possible, and usually that pipe's pulling from that lowest point inside containment.
yeah, we don't, I mean, don't break the bank. It'll be, take a little cup, a little dipstick on it, spit you out a number, and you're like, I'm good, you can open up the pipe, sit there with it. That's what's in the rule as well, sit there with it while it drains out, but then you know it's just stormwater. And that's what we're looking for too, so it's just stormwater.
What is the number, TDS number that you allow for release of?
So that's where it's kind of 50, but so general fresh water is gonna be around 500 milligrams per liter. And that's what all the fresh water streams in this area are right around, is 500. So anything over 500, then you have some salt mix in there.
I like to say there's an influence.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's an influence.
And then if you wanted this double check, you can sample any water that's nearby your facility, check that, because that's gonna be your fresh water, that's gonna be your,
And you can check it off like a puddle or something. You know,
Yeah.
it hasn't been contaminated, so.
yeah. If you ever forget, just pull a sample there and you should be pretty much good to go.
I wrote that down too, though, that's your documentation. And I know people hate paperwork. I don't know if y'all remember Carla when she worked with AEQ, but she's like, man, they hate paperwork, they hate it, they don't wanna do it. And so you just tell them what to do and they'll do it though, and I was like, I get it, but that's, paperwork is just a part of it. We're gonna get to some stuff where it's gonna be easy, the paperwork's gonna be easier. We're gonna give you some pointers on it though, so.
And the big haul on the paperwork, just to get in that SPCC plan, site specific. That's the hardest part and the most paperwork is that part. Any more questions on like in the field issues or?
We got some more.
Now I'm gonna jump into a case study. This one was in Oklahoma and it just shows a few different ranges of what we're looking for, and it'll actually have a checklist on the right side on some of these slides on what we marked on the actual inspection checklist on versus what's in the picture as well. So on this first one, it's just, we take an overview, and this one is noted that there is excessive vegetation on the berm. And then here too as well with the large pine trees and saplings coming up every year, just make sure to knock those down. And then this is another one we see in the field is load line, secondary containment for load lines. You just need a catch bucket. These ones we prefer, but even a 5-gallon bucket underneath. As long as you have something underneath. That's gonna be all load lines. And in this picture, you can see this one was good. And this one was hooked up to, I think, their salt tank. And this one didn't have a bucket. So that was one ding on them on that one. Yeah, here's a closer up picture of it, facing the containment on that line.
So what you said, a lot of tanks have, particularly saltwater facilities, they have a load, unload line where if they need saltwater, they can go out of it. If they pick up saltwater from another, they can, unload it into the tank. It needs one of those catch basins on the too.
If it's outside of secondary containment, it does. So if you have your load lines within containment, you don't need any bucket or any containment on it. But if it sticks out, then you do. Load or unload on it. So then inside secondary containment, there's a produced water leak, I think right at that valve. So then at that point, that's going to contaminate your water whenever you discharge any storm water. So that's another thing that we're looking for. And when we're doing the inspections, that's what we're taking pictures of and sending it in the inspection reports, just so you can take care of it before any inspections happen on that side. I'll go back to this one again. So not in this picture, but in other cases, we'll have a bunch of this loose oil inside containment. And that's going to fall under containment capacity. So if you have a bunch of loose oil in containment, then that could also be written up as an issue. So make sure to try to keep them as clean as possible inside. So on this one, let's see, some overgrowth on the berm, what he's pointing out in this picture. And then we'll look at the largest tank inside the facility, because secondary containment has the whole distill of the largest tank. So we'll note the largest tank that's inside. There's the ID plate. And here's another one. Let's see. This excessive growth again on this one as well. All right, and here's gonna be, yeah, an eroded low spot side on the berm. So any low spots, we covered it earlier, just make sure to keep it built up. As you go by, if you see a low spot, just back it up and make it slightly taller and match the rest around it. So this is just a larger overview. This is another overview showing that low spot on containment, that corner. Hard to see on that. So now this is the checklist on this side, and then I zoomed in on it so we can actually read it on this side on what we checked off on the inspection checklist. So on this one, they had inadequate containment or drainage for the loading area, and that's gonna be that one loading line, and I think that first picture we went over. And then no inspection records were available for review, so they didn't have that 3 year of records on the inspection records. And then no training, and that's the one that you can have over a quick chat, just write down that you had the training and sign it. Nothing crazy on that either. And then no training on discharge protocols, same exact type of training, just make sure you have the records for it. And then no training on applicable pollution control laws, rules, and regulations, and or SPCC plan. So whenever you do get your SPCC plan, just go over it with who you're working with, and then sign off on it. And then spill prevention briefings are not scheduled, and that's gonna be once a year. That's when you go over that plan, and it can take just a minute. Just sign off on it, hold that record. Excessive vegetation, which affects the integrity. We saw that on that berm on that one. And then walls of containment system slightly eroded. And we noted that one as well earlier on that corner. And then flow lines with no secondary containment need contingency plan and written commitment of resources. So that's going to be an active secondary containment showing that you actually visually inspect those flow lines. And then here's going to be some resources. So this is going to be that SPCC plan template. And if you just go through that, fill it out, and then you're going to have to get your records of training and keep that on a separate document as well. But then if you have any questions, you can always call us. But this document up here is probably one of the best documents to answer any SPCC related questions you have.
Do you have those in printed form?
I can get those in printed form. I don't have them on me.
Okay.
But I can get some and put them out here. That is it on the SPCC front.
Question for you.
Yep.
Let's say hypothetically that you have been remiss in doing your 3 year deal. How do you catch up.
Catch up. I didn't hear that.
You just start from the day that you realize it, because that's the better way to go. And I'm telling you, these things are easy to address, the non-paperwork that you haven't been keeping up with, because you basically say, from this moment forward, I will start doing this. And we can't fault you for that, you know what I mean? You said what you're gonna do, you've acknowledged it, and that's all we could ask you to do as well. So when it comes to paperwork things, it's when we come back again, and you know what I mean, we come back a year later and it's still the same issues, then maybe that's a problem. But the very first time, I chalk it all up as nobody in this room knowing anything until they know. And then once you've been told, you know, this is what needs to be done, then that should be an old hat, and you do it. And if we come back again, it's like, great, this all looks good, this is what we want, and it's all good. If we come back and it's like, this looks the same as it was last year, you know, it might get a little grumpier.
Yeah, or I was told at one time that you're supposed to have these plans on site, but can you have them like you have a building or an office? Maybe not in the, let's say you have several different leases, but you got an office and you keep your spill plans in that office. And if y'all want to go look at them, you can go and inspect them there. Do we have to have them in the vehicle with us?
During the time of inspection, you'll know which facilities and you'll just bring those
Oh,
plans.
okay,
But
so we have to
keep
have-
them in the office, yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, you don't have to drive around with all of them all day.
Yeah, before we go into the saltwater section of this, I wanted to say that the reason we're down here is for saltwater. So we're here also, but when we look at stuff and see SPCC related stuff, we refer that to SPCC inspectors. So we're not SPC inspectors, we're like energy sectors, that falls under a different program. So when we refer our really bad tank batteries to SPCC, they bring those inspectors in. I know what it sounds like, but anyway, so then they will sit there and give you a notice of inspection. We give notice of inspection as well, that's just how we roll. I did that at the state as well, I just believe in a notice of inspection. So they'll let you know, they'll get you prepared. It probably won't be enough time to get, you know, 100 leases, you know, SPCC plans for 100 leases and stamped. But I'm giving you this little bit of information. Do that stuff around water first. So if you've got leases around water, get those done first and then work on other stuff after that. Because we're not going to be bothered with stuff that's not around water.
That's what they call like a tier two. If it's close, like it's in our area, if you smack over creek feeds directly into the Washita River.
Yeah, that's what, that tier 2, yeah. And
Because I mean, every drain eventually gets there. They call it, used to call it tier one, tier two, and tier three. I think the Washita River was tier one, back over creek would be tier two, and then any drainage in the back of creek would be.
yes, yeah, I think, I know what you're talking about, tier,
Were you saying the ones that are close to, and reasonably be discharged into the mouth?
yes, natural water.
So for us, I think you're saying that anything that's near, it's not going to creek.
Yeah, anything, the closest there, then kind of work your way out. Yeah, but that'd be a good starting point.
That's not good advice. No. But they will give you a notice, that's what.
Yeah, they'll give you a notice, but usually it's not enough time to get a plan made and
Okay,
have all the records in time.
all right. Larry and I ran into this situation. Back in the summer, the man that writes our plans came down. He reviewed some plans for me, but then I had some facilities that he wrote me plans. Well, he goes back to Oklahoma and dies. He's dead.
Yeah,
We paid for our plans, but we can't get them, so we have to pay to get them written again.
yeah. Unfortunately, because they just want the plan, they have to review the plan by the time of inspection. So you can have it the day of, but by not having a plan, that's one of the thing you want. It's actually first on the list.
pretty steep. Fine.
Big fine, how much is the fine or something like that?
These are,
It depends. So with all the ones we just went over, and it varies by each facility, by capacity, a bunch of different variables, but the one we just went over with those checks, I think was around 5,000. So it can add up pretty quick. So each check is gonna just keep adding to it. But if you have just one check and that's it, or two, depending on which one's checked, then there won't be any type of violation associated. It'll be just fix it and we're all good. But once you get multiple checks, then a violation will probably have, well, a penalty.
if you get a report from me or Michael, ours are referrals, so we referred it, but we sent it to you like areas of concern. And that's all it is. We're just letting you know what the areas of concern are. But that's a big hint. If you take care of that, you're not likely to have problems from the SPCC inspectors.
Okay, y'all did an inspection on one of mine. Okay, when we go in and clean the tank out, we'll dig a hole right there at the tank door to wash out in so the vacuum truck. Now, y'all told me that those had to be filled in because the tank could cave over in. Right?
Yes, yeah. So you can do that, but then after, just replace that soil back. Cause so they're also looking at another thing we see is if you have gapping underneath, and usually if it's small, the SPCC inspector will be like, just fill it in. Usually just bring a shovel with you during the inspection and just toss some dirt on there and you're good. But whenever it starts getting excessive and you have like almost a foot gap on their one side, then we've seen them where they'll tip over.
And we understand, there's like those hatches, I've talked to some of y'all on them, like, well, I have to have a gap under that hatch, and so we get that off, and people are like, we get that, we understand y'all's rationale behind it, and the rationale behind the SPCC part of it is, you just don't want this stuff tipping over and causing issues, you really don't want stuff falling on those levees, you don't want stuff, like if you've got pipes that kind of sag, you don't want those falling off and spraying oil outside your containment. It's all about keeping stuff inside.
Yeah, that.
Yeah, if you have a long run of like polyline inside containment, going from
Tank to tank.
tank to tank, you'll need a support as well.
But you also said that poly lines could not touch the top or the side of the tank.
Yes.
For fear of vibration wearing a hole in it.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
So as long as you have some
Yeah.
type of support, just a little wide support up there, you're good.
Okay, 2 before to keep it off the tank side.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Because it has to like minimize, it's in the plan, minimize abrasion and that's the other part of it. But as long as you have a long run, make sure you have supports. And it can't be just a tire on the ground too, support. Because we'll see just a tire holding out the line. You actually need just a wide frame holding it.
I do want to tell you one last thing about the SPCC stuff that I've seen some do is put a sump inside their secondary containment. They just feed it back through the system. So if oil is already in secondary containment, they're capturing that back and putting it in the system. And if salt water's in there or even storm water, you're sending it to an injection well anyway, and it goes back to the system. That's no discharge. That's what I like personally, but it doesn't do anything about capacity. So I like seeing that. I'm just saying, I've seen somebody like, I'm getting rid of that pipe. I'm like, you just made my day when you get rid of that pipe. You made it easier on yourself when you just pump everything back in through your system. And you get your oil back, and then you've already got a saltwater disposal well, so that's where it needed to go anyway. So that's what I like. I like sumps.
But it's don't use the sump to float oil off a tank if your separator's not working. We see that too.
Is it my turn?
Yep, it is yours.
So I have to tell you, I am from Arkansas. And when I first got in this program and I saw that they were calling this brine, I was like, that means something completely different in Arkansas. It might mean the same thing in Region 6 for Oklahoma, New Mexico, Texas, Louisiana, but in Arkansas, it means something completely different. And so I hate it, and I use salt water when I can. That's what it means to me. It's salt water in South Arkansas. The brine to me is heavier, and it's our two, the two plants that we have here in South Arkansas that make brine or utilize brine for bromine. But anyway, so this is I think I even went there and changed that to salt water, and they changed it back.
Yeah.
But anyway, I did change it for South Arkansas. I wanted it to be salt water. But I told Gary that I would put like a little caveat here about brine, like that's just what Region 6 calls it. But I am aware of what brine means to people in Arkansas. So, but anyway, what we mean by brine, salt water, is produced water. So even if you're doing natural gas, I started in the Fayetteville Shale with ADEQ. And so we had flowback water is what we were used to. So we had the same setup that they have down here in South Arkansas, just not as many saltwater disposal wells in the north part of the state as we did in south part of the state. And then I got South Arkansas when I became a inspector supervisor, and I had Chris Boss under me, and I actually had Connery under me for a little while, and then he quit. But it is different. This is a whole different animal in South Arkansas. I love South Arkansas. But it's completely different than the dry gas up in the Fayetteville Shale. But it's still tanks and it's still wells and they're still producing energy, is how I look at it. But produced water, flowback, all that water that comes out of that well, that's what we call brine. It's salt water to me, but anyway. So here's some characteristics. It's high in salt. In this part of the state, believe it or not, we have a total maximum daily load for minerals down in this part of the state. It seems to peter off on the east side, and it gets it's real high in the west and over here around El Dorado. And it's because of that historic salt water that's just came up from those formations and it's been released. And so we have a high total resolved solids in this part of the state anyway. That's why I don't also necessarily like that 500 milligrams per liter, because I do think South Arkansas is a little higher and that we should be using something that's a standard for South Arkansas and not a national standard, because we're not going to meet that national standard. But anyway, that's what it is. But we're looking for salt. That's what it, our chlorides and our sulfides. And we can have heavy metals, hydrocarbons from the crude oil, and then other chemicals that are associated with the process. Anything that you add in there, those biosolids to keep stuff flowing, that'll be another component that's in there. And we are inspecting these under the Clean Water Act. So everyone asks, we seem to get that like, AOGC's out here like every other week. It's like, yeah, they have their own state programs and things like that. We're under the Clean Water Act, so oil and gas is exempt, not exempt from the Clean Water Act, but as an industry, they're pretty much exempt from permitting. So that's the aspect of it. So to get out of permitting, the industry has to come up with best management practices, and that plan's one of them that says that you'll make sure your releases are reported and cleaned up and all that other good stuff. But you get out of a permit that is binding and has things that can be violations. So that's how I look at it. This route is, I think it's a good deal. Ag is almost completely exempt. So look at it that way. There are things that are exempt from the Clean Water Act or from permitting because of their use to the country. I like to eat, so I like my farmers, and I like to get around. So there are exemptions that I think are necessary. So that's what we're here for, is unlawful discharges of contaminated, of pollutants. That's what it's about. This is just straight up stormwater. We wouldn't have a reason to be here. And if there was straight up no discharges, there probably wouldn't be a reason. So total dissolved solids, here's that 500 milligrams per liter. That also translates into parts per million. So when you see milligrams per liter, if you want something that's easy to understand, it's also parts per million. And then seawater, about 30,000. We get readings. We've gotten readings up here at 50,000 in our fresh water. So we know someone's inadvertently, they don't know, I've heard that all the time. It's just salt water. It's like, yeah, freshwater fish do not like that. They like fresh water. They don't like salt water. saltwater fish like saltwater. So we've seen it again up to about 50,000 milligrams per liter in this area. And then it can vary, you can see that 70,000, that's pretty hot. And that's indicative of produced water, of salt water. We know that it's coming from oil and gas at that point. It's denser, so it'll sink. So most of the time if you're doing like a sample, you don't want to stick, your little dipstick reader, your probe right at the top. You're just gonna get fresh water that flows over the top. This stuff sinks to the bottom, so you gotta get on the bottom to see what you really have. It'll flush out. But I've been to places where I'll do a tier, I'll put it in at the top, and you can steadily see it increase as it gets to the bottom. It just sinks down there. And then what else I got? That's it, goes down the water. So the impacts of saltwater brine, like livestock, I don't want to drink that stuff. Like if it's above 1,000 milligrams per liter, it can have negative effects. I think they're pushing livestock and wildlife because those are the things that it can impact, but really it's aquatic systems as well. Like our fish and our macroinvertebrates, our drinking water supplies. If you contaminate your drinking water supplies, it just takes more to treat that, and then your water prices go up on your potable water. And then it can affect stream segments. So anybody that discharges to that, like somebody that's permitted, their permit limits can go up because they then have to treat it because it's already contaminated, so they can't add to it. So you can have segments that are affected versus the whole stream. And then groundwater concerns as well. You don't want your groundwater to get contaminated. It's real similar to your drinking water supply. And then here's my case study, and this is New Mexico, and it's a little bit different than what we see down here. So I might make some little sedge off of it, because this is going to be a mobile source. This was a tanker truck that rolled over, and then it's in New Mexico, and New Mexico isn't delegated, which means the state doesn't have control over their environmental laws and their permits. So EPA actually is the one who has to inspect and do things in New Mexico. Arkansas is delegated, Louisiana is delegated, Texas delegated, Oklahoma, other than tribal lands, are delegated. But New Mexico is the only state in Region 6 that's not delegated yet. And then, so this is case study. We got 65 barrels of produced water that enters Black River. So this is one of the rare instances of a perennial stream in New Mexico. So Michael worked this one, gets this NRC report, goes and works it. A few days later, like 5 days later.
Yeah, about 5 days after.
Yeah, so it's 5 days after. All right. Kind of give you an idea of where it's, so you can see the creek on there, and it is a perennial. But what was the deal? They were going up an incline. They couldn't get up it.
Yeah,
They
so
just
that,
emptied out their load to get up the hill. So,
yeah, and that
yeah.
road makes this pretty
Don't
steep.
laugh at it. Don't laugh at this stuff. Though.
If you get stuck.
Yeah.
We don't have those kind of implants.
Or was it the one that was in the curve?
This was the
All right,
curve,
yeah, so it's
but-
a sharp curve.
but same company
Okay.
before this got stuck going up the hill. It was a steep hill. It was in Oklahoma, that one.
But it was the same company?
Yeah, same
Okay,
company.
yeah. Bad.
And they dumped it all out in the creek.
So yeah, this one was going around that, doing like a, NASCAR around that corner there, dumped the whole truck. So the whole truck turned over. We're not trying to, we didn't put anything in Arkansas on this one. Okay, next slide. Truck dumps over. These case studies are fun because you'll get to see what we get to do with these. So here's kind of the area. They like barricaded it off to show you where the accident was. And again, Michael's here about 5 days later. So this gives you an overview. This is where the accident happened, okay? Here's where it was kind of impacted the drainage ditch. You see this water through here. We have a start. There's more of it where they got in there and kind of excavated some area there. More excavated area. The part that we get to is like, okay, so we stick our little TDS meter in here. Y'all don't buy this meter, by the way. It's like $10,000.
Yeah,
Don't do that. Get a little dipstick one. It's like $30. This is a pretty sweet meter though. Anyway, so we get So you have what we call a point of entry, you stick your probe in there and you want to, let's see what we got going on here, what is it 5 days later? And he gets, we look at this reading down at the bottom, and that's 1,115. So we know that there's I would say an influence, we know there's an influence there. And then I also found out this area is kind of interesting, it had an ash influence.
Yeah.
So it made the pH or something weird too.
Yeah, in the background,
Okay, yeah.
TDS was also really high in this area. So normal freshwater, like here I'll see 500 and sometimes lower for the spring.
Yeah,
I'll see like 25.
we
Like
saw that today.
there's nothing. Yeah, we saw that today.
Yeah.
But here, the background was, we'll see it was like 1,000 still or somewhere close to it.
And these are photos that we would take, so we got that point of entry, and we always kind of try to keep organized. We're gonna take a picture upstream, and we're gonna take a picture downstream. This is just the flow with what, if you get an inspection of something like this. So we'll always show you upstream, we'll always show you downstream with that reading that we took at that particular location. And Michael took several of these, so he's walking down the stream just to get to the low point, and then he does a background, which is like was not impacted by the rollover by any means. Jerry, you gotta get out of here. All right, I'll see you.
So y'all watch these.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Then here's another one, you've gone down, but you see it's gone down a little bit, it's now 1,060. Again, upstream and downstream at this location. Going down, well, it's pretty similar.
That one is,
1,065, it's real similar. Taking those pictures upstream and downstream. Still real
this was the
similar.
background.
Well, it's real similar.
Yeah.
But
So-
yeah,
Dilution on this one.
upstream, downstream. Okay, duplicate.
Yeah.
But you see, it's just a bunch of walking down a creek after the point of entry.
Yeah.
So like a reference for Arkansas, I'm not saying that this has happened, but let's say we've got like a drain pipe, there's like a pool of water under it, we'll stick the meter in there. I got one that was pretty high, about 30,000. And then you walk down, and you just keep walking down until it gets less and less and less. And then you see where your impact area is at.
Yeah. And then right before that impact area, upstream of it, we'll get a reading, and that's gonna be your background. So then if we do find that, then we'll have you clean that creek segment, usually with a back truck, flush it, and get it back to that background measurement.
Or hope it rains before
When
we
you
have
say
it.
flush it, you just mean bring
Fresh.
Fresh
fresh
water.
water to dilute it down. to
Yeah.
what y'all-
But back it up at the bottom.
Yeah.
So have a catch point. So usually a lot of people,
Put it on the bottom, yeah.
yeah, they'll build this a temporary dam just to stop it. So especially if it's not in a perennial already, build a temporary dam, you back it up, and then flush it, usually twice or sometimes
Yeah.
to get it all out.
The method for getting 99% is usually three
Yeah.
flushes, but yeah, so we'll even tell you where the segment stops, and it's usually pretty short. So don't think that you're going miles down a creek, unless you didn't catch it, and we go miles.
Yeah.
We've gone miles down a creek too, but as long as you get it to that background level that we find, and then that's pretty much it. If there's nothing, nothing as daunting as a crude oil release.
Yeah.
When it comes to these, so.
And then with this as well, wherever because with these pictures on the inspection report, we'll have the lat long where that end is. And we'll call you and tell you too where that is, that end point. And that's where it's a good idea to probably put a temporary dam there. And that's gonna just keep it from there, back up to that tank battery, and let's work on that part. Because if it goes further, then you're gonna have to spend more money trying to clean up more stream segments.
And then there's so many, like above ground flow lines and so many operators on a stream segment. it gets difficult pinpointing. That's the silver lining for everybody in here. It's difficult to say it's just this person or just this person. But the thing that we do get is if we have an open pipe or if we have a sample right at the pool of water that's below your pipe, we can go, at least you have done something. You're at least one of maybe many that we can at least say, hey, close your pipe, suck out that hole, route stuff back through your system, things like that. And not expecting you to clean an entire stream up, knowing that you're probably not the only one impacting it. We done with this case study.
Let's see,
More of them.
this downstream.
And that just kind of gives you like, you know, again, Michael got out here like not very much later, but you just have to keep in mind when we dispatch out that we're not necessarily leaving from that exact same location. But they're doing remediation, that's the point. They put signs up around that spill location. And this one is just a little bit different because it's a mobile source versus a stationary source. So most of the stuff around here is going to be a stationary source. That'll give you an idea of what we would do. We would start at the point of entry and just go down the creek until we found where it just kind of levels out, where it's either background or it's not being contaminated yet. But this next section, this is spill reporting. And this is the thing that I know y'all hate, paperwork, but I'm going to tell you, this is when you have to report crude oil. Keep in mind, if it touches water, you got to report it. You got to report it at the federal level, not just the state level, but you got to report it at the federal level. That's a big deal. But next page, and this is some of the things that'll apply why you have to report. But a sheen, I mean, if there's a sheen on water, you got to report it. It hits water, you got to report it regardless of the quantity. And then there's a quantity, like 1 barrel.
Yeah, well, even if there's a sheen, it has to be reported if it's on the water body. And it's from you, then you have to report that.
Not for water body.
No.
Outside of the tank.
Yeah, outside of contaminant in the water body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's this next one. Let me get to it. So this is the National Response Center number, the 1-800. They will do everything for you. You just call them up and they will fill out the paperwork for you, and they notify AOGC, they notify ADEQ, and they notify EPA, and they notify ADM, Arkansas Department of Emergency Management. They notify everybody and they fill out that stuff for you. So you're there on the phone with them and you just have to tell them stuff and they're filling out a report for you. This is not you doing this. This is, they are sitting there. This is the Coast Guard and they're sitting, it is Coast Guard.
Yep.
Yeah, it's the Coast Guard and they're just sitting there inputting this stuff in a computer and they blast it out to several emails and you've done what you needed to do when you're reporting a spill. And then, so this is the federal part of the crude oil part here with the National Response Center. But the next page.
And on this too, when you call that number, it only takes maybe 5 minutes to go through their list of questions and answer them, and then you're done on that front. So it doesn't take long.
And again,
Can you describe a good sheen? Is it just any looking oil floating on the top, or does it have to, you know, I mean, my truck out there is
so there,
getting a sheen on your parking
right,
lot.
there's bio sheens. We get, like, at ADEQ, we would get those complaints all the time. There's crude oil in my pond. I was like, no, that's iron flocculated bacteria. I know for a fact what it is because it's in your pond and you're nowhere near crude oil. And so when they send you the pictures, we have, ADEQ has a flyer set up for this and everything because we would get so many complaints for those. And we would like, you need to do the stick test. Does it break up like a window? They're like, yeah. I was like, yeah, that's a biosheen. It's caused from iron magnesium flocculation, and it causes this little beautiful little shiny sheen on top. But you break it, and it breaks up like a mirror, like a glass. Yeah.
It's real good to know.
Yeah, and then, but if it's a petro or a hydrocarbon, it'll come back together. And so it's like, you don't know the those people just don't know the difference between a petro or a hydrocarbon sheen versus a biological sheen. I hope we all know what a hydrocarbon sheen looks like, but that stuff comes back together. It's the stuff that'll do that nice, pretty rainbow sheen, and one little drop can look like a lot. And that's another thing to bring people off of the edge with that, because they're like, I got like a massive crude oil spill down here. It's like, that looks like 2 drops of like WD-40 was sprayed somewhere. But it just spreads, a little amount can spread a long way. So yeah, it's the sheen. If you can see a sheen and you know it's a petro sheen, it has to be on water. It has to be reported.
And one of the things they ask is if you know the quantity, and if it's something small, it could be cups. So you can just tell them cups worth, but usually you aren't.
That's an estimate, and even say that, like,
Yeah.
I'm estimating
It's an
this is a guess.
Yeah. So that's one of the questions, is just an estimated amount. So you could say unknown, you could say maybe a cup worth if it's this tiny.
What basically has me concerned is that there's a lot of mud holes around beaches. And I can park my truck over it, and a drop of oil will drip down in it, and I get a sheen.
Yeah, it'll be.
This will be from your operation.
Yeah, from operation,
Yeah.
and it won't be just a tiny little segment where like you go to snack over and you see a little bubble floating by a sheen. It'll be a decent sheen. It'll be.
Okay.
And it
Yeah.
has to be associated with you. I mean, if you're some like random citizen and you're out fishing on Smackover Creek, they can do that too. If they see some sheen coming down that's from like a little bubble, I've seen little bubbles pop up on Smackover, and then you'll get a sheen. Well, they can call that in. They're just calling it in. That doesn't mean it's going to be investigated, and it doesn't mean there's anything that anybody can do about it. No one knows where that came from. But if you've got an operation and you've opened up a pipe and then you notice, after the fact that, oh, I've got a sheen down here, at the base of where my drainage was at, yeah, you got to report that. You know what I mean?
Well, I'm not talking about creek. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about drain.
Yeah, so on that, you can report that one. It gets kind of dicey. So on this one, it's gonna be mostly on the navigable waterfront. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's what we mean, though. We don't mean, again, I like to use like a realistic scenario that if you're on 1,000 acres of land and you change your oil, I'm telling you the stuff that you would get people complaining about. You have to use a little bit of common sense. There's like at the state level, there's likely to pollute. At the federal level, we don't use that. The state can be more stringent than the federal level, and they choose to do so. Arkansas does, I know that. So they have a likely to pollute. So someone changing their oil out on 1,000 acres of land with no water present, is that likely to pollute waters of the state? I'm asking everybody in here. No, I'm not going out there. The federal government's not going out there, the state government's not gonna go out there. So we use that, is it likely to pollute waters of the state, likely to pollute, under the Clean Water Act. That's what we're going for. So we would use common sense with that, and we would want everybody else to use common sense with that. So use that scenario. It's about water, so keep that in mind. It's about water.
And they'll ask you if water was
Yes.
impacted or what water body. And say you don't know if you need to call them or not, and you call them, tell them at the pond, it's
swamp.
Yes, wetlands
so,
are covered, yeah.
So that one you would report.
So it's not just like waters of the US, it's wetlands as well. So, you can't discharge crude oil to wetlands, and there's a lot of wetlands in South Arkansas.
Start crude oil.
Huh?
To the tanker.
We're gonna go over some, and this is for AOGC, we put this in here, we didn't know. So AOGC actually has spill reporting as well, and emergency type stuff, so this is what you would fill, they make you fill out this 2 pages this form 24, there's a hyperlink to it. And then here's phone numbers for South Arkansas and North Arkansas. Got the stuff on here. But I'm giving you what this form 24 looks, it gives you instructions. It's right there under the operator tab and forms. And it tells you how to do it, tells you what rules this applies to. Okay. It goes into more reporting requirements. This is ALGC, this is not the federal government doing this deal. Okay. And then this is some 80, did it not show the form 24?
I think so, maybe they took it out.
Okay. Maybe someone took it out, but I had like a picture of it where you could kind of see like the little tab. And it's a fillable. It's one of those where you just fill the buttons and it submits it for you. It's a good form. And then there's reporting for ADEQ. ADEQ also requires some reporting under Rule 1, Rule 2, and Rule 6. And then here's ADEQ. You can have federal and state permits. So ADEQ or Arkansas is delegated to write and permit the NPS, which is the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System. Does not apply to anybody in this room unless y'all are commercial. If you're not commercial, don't worry about that. And then they just have some permitting for stormwater, what that's about.
And real,
Is all this available on the internet?
It is.
Websites or on one specific website?
It is. So E&E has a website that can get kind of confusing, but if you put AOGC, you can get to their legitimate website that's great to use. And the same for ADEQ, but for ADEQ, be sure to put ADEQ Arkansas, because you can also get Arizona DEQ. So put ADEQ Arkansas, and it'll pull up. I would go to Office of Water Quality. That's what that would fall under for ADEQ. And then they'll go back to that other slide, please. Their rules are up at the top. It's a brown bar. I see it visually. The rules are up at the top in a brown bar, but Office of Water Quality will also have some of that stuff. But the next slide after ADEQ stuff is, next one, is E&E's emergency management reporting, which is the state level of that National Response Center. So it's the state level. And they have an 800, and it's for crude oil and hazardous waste and spills in general.
and real quick, if I go back one.
Yeah.
Going back to SPCC, on that bottom there, if your tanks are manifolded together from the bottom, then your largest container is gonna be all those tanks combined, or whatever tanks are connected to each other from the bottom. So then your secondary containment gets a little larger. So that's,
Even with the valve,
yes, if valves are open on them,
if valves are open, but
Yes.
if they're closed, then.
yes, then you're good.
Okay.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's just something I wanted to point out since I saw that.
So yes, so E&E has their emergency management. Again, it's real similar to that National Response Center. They will do the same thing, pretty much, they will. And then they have a big number, their 501 number down here. And so that's just spill reporting information. I just wanted to get that off the bat, all that. I think that concludes. If y'all got questions.
Y'all talked about literature real early. You said you didn't have any with you now, but you could bring some back.
Yes.
Well, is there any way we could leave our name and company and mailing address, get y'all this?
Yeah, I can send it over to you all that.
What about your slideshow?
We'll have to check and see if we can release it. I think we will be able to, but we'll be at probably a week turnaround. We'll have to see. But I can ask, and I'll get everyone's email address. and
We
we'll-
should have had a sign-in sheet.
Yeah.
That would have been nice to put email addresses.
We'll get a sheet passed around and get everyone's email address. We can send out all that information. And then I'll add, there is public record for the SPCC inspections, the actual checklist they go through. So it wouldn't be bad just to go through that checklist on some of your facilities, and just do a big inspection on it.
Sure.
Direction. Or are you asking for?
Yeah, just a sign-in sheet, so
Yeah.
y'all can get y'all names, numbers, and then we'll send out a
Can
blast.
this be considered training?
I think it's
Yeah.
Write it down.
Nice to meet
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, but that's probably, hey, I'm sign in, put your email address in here.
Are you doing? I'm doing real good.
Would turn this off.
Y'all didn't bring rough weather for me.
Not this time.
Well, it's pretty deal,
No, we're